Well, there's a close-up of a cracked rotor, and I never noticed this. Actually, maybe it wasn't that cracked before, and maybe it had a hairline split in it, but it's cracked from here all the way to here. You notice it's on one of the holes too. This is a cast rotor. It's an original rotor, and I was just checking the specification on this particular bike. The wear limit on the front is 180 thousandths. That's 208. It's 210 thousandths. So it's not beyond the wear limit. I'm going to make a couple comments on this because you notice this is painted black here, and the last time I did the tires, I reasoned that and the rotors were good. The last time I did the tires, what I did was I painted with high heat paint some of this so it doesn't rust, because I figured the one main problem with these cast steel rotors, they're cast iron actually, is that they can rust. That's the problem. And once they rust, you can get some stress cracks. Now the other thing on a motorcycle, the rotors are thinner than on a car, so rust can make much more of a big difference on a motorcycle rotor than it could on a car, because you got a lot more thickness, the metal to rust through. Now, the thing is, I was looking at something here, and it's like looking at the pros and cons of stainless steel. Now, obviously, the stainless steel, I got a 420 stainless steel coming in, new replacement rotor, and but this could have been disastrous, man. If that rotor fell apart while you're riding, it would lock up your front wheel, or more. It could. I mean, definitely could. It might not. Then again, who the hell knows? It could have just. It might. It could jam into the freaking caliper, lock up your front wheel. That would have been disastrous. It might have held up for a while too, but you definitely don't ride it with that on there. Now, but the stainless steel rotor is about over twice as much money as the cast iron one. And so I got a 420 stainless steel one coming in. It's a little more rust resistant than the 410. I don't know, some of them are 410, some are 420. Not much of a difference as far as rust resistance. Here they're telling you ventilation holes are not recommended to avoid cracks, on iron rotors or the cast iron. Here we got ventilation. Now, this, I bet you though, I think there's two things that actually, it wasn't past the wear limit. It wasn't even close to the wear. I mean, it had quite a bit left to go before it got to the wear limit. And you got to remember, there's a little safety factor even with the wear limit too. I mean, when something says that's when it should be replaced, it doesn't mean it's going to blow up at that time either. I'd say there's a couple things that are a factor in why this actually broke. One is I got a single disc brake, so I don't like smash on my rear brake because you don't want to lock up the tire. You use the front brake the most, so I really have to grab that front brake handle and squeeze it hard. There's no anti-locking brakes on here, but my anti-locking on this, quote unquote, is basically that the brake is not strong enough to really lock up the wheel. I mean, you'd have to be on, you'd have to be on a pavement that isn't, grippy or something. I mean, there have to be a little sand on the road or something for you to lock up the wheel. I mean, this brake is not, I really can't lock up the wheel on this thing. So I'm putting quite a bit of strain on a single disc. Number two is I've already changed out the pads a couple times, but I checked the rotor. Like I said, that's why I put I got the back one's fine. The back one has stock Harley pads in it too, brake pads. But I changed the caliper on this thing. I changed the cable, with a stainless steel brake hose. It also changed up here the master cylinder, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards. The only thing I didn't change was the rotor, but it was good. No cracks at that time. So, but that's another indication that I was using the front brake a lot more than the rear brake, which is what you should do, right? I mean, you don't want to be locked like a lot of typical, one of the dumbest things you could do is lock up the rear wheel. Now, obviously, they got these ABS things today, which I don't have, and I don't really want because it's more complicated junk to freaking fix. But when I put this brake pads on, the brake pads came with the caliper. Now, I know they weren't the type that were incompatible with cast rotors, cast iron rotors, but they weren't the stock Harley ones. That might have had made an influence too, because maybe these pads produce higher heat, versus the stock Harley pads. I bet you if I had the stock Harley Davidson pads, this might not have cracked. I think this just cracked due to heat. I was thinking, did I do this when I was moving a bike? I said, no way in hell. It was just from heat. So the other thing is, the thing is, these cast rotors are not really bad or nothing, but I'm going to avoid them in the future, even though they're cheaper. Now, they don't really rust that easy because they're zinc coated right from the factory. And if you don't have your bike outside and you don't ride it in the rain all the time, they're not really going to rust. And like I said, what I did was I put some of that high heat paint on there, so just in case it would start a stress crack from rust. But nothing happened. From rust, it just happened from heat of the using the brake. Possibly because of the aftermarket pads. Now, it tells you there's certain kinds of pads you don't use with cast types, which is the sintered. They're not compatible with most sintered pads. Now, I did not have that type, but the thing is, I had an aftermarket brake pad in here, and that might, like I said, if I used Harley Davidson pads that were OEM all the way, that would have never happened, because they're designed to work with that rotor. But in the future, I'm definitely not getting cast rotors. To hell with that crap. Iron rotors, yeah, they're going stainless steel. And the other thing is, the stainless steel, if you look on the right there, doesn't wear as fast. Stronger or less likely to crack. That's what freaking definitely, you don't want that problem happening. And the other thing is, if it's like shiny stainless steel and it doesn't have any surface rust on it, it's going to be a lot easier to inspect the rotor to see if it's got a tiny hairline stress crack that you can't see because there's a light coat of rust someplace on the rotor. I know where the pads rub gets all shiny, but like in here, say a crack was starting in here, if it's stainless steel, you can wipe it off with some cleaner or something, not brake cleaner or something, and you can see if there's a crack going to start. Now, if it's zinc, eventually, or it's zinc plated, eventually the zinc goes away. Plus, the zinc gets like a real dark gray color, and it gets real rough, like surface, as it's consumed with the oxidation. And if there's some kind of crack starting, you're not going to see it under that. But if it's shiny stainless steel, you're going to see it. You're going to see it. Now, my back rotor, what I did was, I used a strong light, like this thing right here, and I used my reading glasses, and I went over it. I looked at it real careful. I don't see any cracks. But then, I don't really use I use the back brake, but I don't like slam on the back brake. That's the, so it seems to be there's a lot less. This now, if I had dual discs up here, this might not have happened because I don't have, you don't have to really grab onto the lever as much. But there's not really a problem with a single disc. It stops the bike fine. And obviously, sometimes I hear all these things about, dual disc and this and that, and all this garbage. Well, sometimes when I'm like kind of old school, when I bought this bike new, this is in '89, right? When I bought this bike new, it had a swing arm. It had, the handlebars were insulated with, with the risers with rubber mounts. The engine's not rubber mounted, but the handlebars are rubber mounted with the risers were rubber mounted, right? Had disc brakes front and rear. People back, not that many years prior to '89, if you're talking in the '70s, a lot of people were riding around with one brake in the back, which is a drum brake, one rear brake. You're talking '70s people. Like, in other words, Harley, the brand new Harleys were '70s, but the ones you'd see on the road were like '60s and '50s. And this thing was like ultra modern. It's sort of like, I don't know, how people say the Jeep is, flip over and it does all this garbage. When the CJ7 came out, it was like world's different from the CJ5 and the old Willys and stuff, or Willis. But today, you know, if you look at a CJ7, people go, oh, that's so unsafe to ride, and it's this and that, it rides like a rock. Well, it rode like a Cadillac compared to everything else before that. So, you know, I'm fine with this thing. I mean, but this did surprise the crap out of me when I saw that. And, you know, it's a crack. What the hell is it? Yeah, you can see a crack right there, almost in the middle of the screen. Yeah, it's all the way through. It's all the way through. Big old crack. Anyway, screw it. Yeah, can't believe that stuff, man. So, I'd advise that if I didn't already take the wheel off, the back rear wheel, and do the chain and shorten the chain and put the sprocket on, I'd probably be changing that sprocket right then and there. I'm not going to change it because there's nothing wrong with it, and I don't really, like I said, I don't really slam on the rear brake. I don't think that. But I'm going to be watching the damn thing. Next time the wheel's off, we're going to go ahead and, that's my oil pressure gauge down here. We're going to go ahead and change that one to a stainless. But there's an infinite number of things that can actually go wrong with a bike too. It's not just, you know, I was doing the tires and the wheels and stuff and the bearings. But there's so many things. Like if you have, you know, a bearing in the transmission, I don't know, a valve seal falls out, or I don't know, something, you know, a valve spring breaks, and you know, anything. There could be something with your oil pump that can go wrong. And you know, some people say, you know, why don't you buy a new one? Well, I don't care if it's Japanese, American, German, Italian, whatever the hell it is. All you know, and I put out. I'm just going to go a little long on this video, but I put out a video about, you know, today's German engineered cars are some of the worst over engineered junk on the planet. You know, they used to be great, you know, the older ones, the ones from way back, you know, the BMWs and the Mercedes and the Volkswagen and stuff, whatever. They were really great back in their day. But that's one of the problems that's going on today. Job security for engineers, they're constantly, it's like, look how we can make things cheaper and better. Well, it's not just Harley, it's all of them. It's like, you know, the constant velocity transmissions. And actually on that video, the only ones that really gave me support were mechanics. The mechanics were saying they knew what I was talking about. But even but what I like about Harley Davidson though is that anything that they come up with that's screwed up, the aftermarket or the mechanics or the machinist had come up with a ready solution for it. You know, there's been the things on this, like, okay, you can get the 103-inch twin cam. I don't particularly, I would like a, you know, a Sportster with engine in a big twin frame. I personally like that idea with a separate transmission. I personally don't like the big twins because they seem so wide. It's not that they're long, it's that they're wide. You know, this one I like, it's thinner, you know, it's a little lighter too, that's another thing. I don't mind it being longer, but, so I'm kind of, I don't really want to go with the bigger Harley. But even so, you know, when they had the twin cam came out, they had problems with the followers that, you know, follow the chain, the plastic followers that follow the chain. And, you know, S&S came out with the gear drive cams. And then they had problems with the oil pump. I mean, not all of them did. Some will run freaking forever and some don't. Now, even what got me was I knew there'd be a problem. When it came out with the Harley Milwaukee 8, I think they called it. It's got 4 valves per cylinder, so it's 8 valves for 2 cylinders. That thing has a problem where sometimes they did not seat the valve seats all the way into the head, and it can come loose. I was like, there you go, there's another freaking thing. So, like, actually, even when the 91s came out with the 5-speed on these things, they got rid of. They got rid of these things, these little blocks, these lifter blocks. You see those things with this thing right here? The hell is right there? The lifter block. It's all cast into the block. So instead of changing out that lifter block, you got to actually sleeve the, like in other words, that wears. You'd have to take out the whole, like, you couldn't just change that lifter block and fix that. You know, if there's just too much slop, because this is the lifter goes inside of there. In 91, they got rid of this. They got it's all one piece. It's all cast into the block itself. And this aluminum that from this lifter block is tougher than this cast aluminum stuff here. This aluminum, whatever the hell you call this, you know, what the block halves are made out of. So if that wears, now you know what happens? You got to sleeve it. But this isn't just Harley. This is everybody, man. Everybody's doing this crap. And you know, I know this bike pretty good, so I'm sticking with it. You know, if I ever decided to say I want a bigger bike, you know what I would do? I would have the frame lengthened, and I'd put a 5-gallon tank on it versus the 3.8-gallon tank that I got in there right now, and I'd call it a day. And if I want to beef up the transmission, I'm going to put the zippers trap door on it and the Andrews main trap shaft, 4-speed, no problem. I don't care, man. You know, the only thing I really say, you know, with this bike, if it was a little longer, like that might be better, but that's not a. Or you can chop it and put a slightly extended fork on it, you know. But you know, it's not that essential. But you know, I'm not. The thing is, I've had this bike almost 30 years. I know it. I don't want to learn something new. So, you know, to the critics out there, half a Harley and all this crap, you know, whatever. You know, if I got to take it out there in the crappy road and there's some mud and I got to walk it through something, I could do it with this thing. It weighs like 300-400 pounds or more or less than those other ones. It's not bad. I got it geared now so it can cruise. But, man, I'm glad I was doing this shit. Next thing is probably going to be the primary chain. I don't know if I'm going to change that rod away because I don't really, it's getting near where I can't adjust it anymore, but most of that wear is in the shoe. You know, not the chain itself. I don't think there's going to be a problem. I'll probably just change the oil in there. I'll probably change it later. You know, but as soon as I get this disc rotor, we'll be putting it on there. I'm going to be putting it on there with Loctite red. I'll be doing a video on that. You can get Loctite red off. I've got new bolts for it, rotor bolts and rotor. You can get Loctite red off by just applying some propane to it. That causes it to, that's how you remove a bolt installed with Loctite red with propane heat. You know, it causes the plastic glue, whatever, the plastic Loctite to break apart. So anyway, this is very important because, you know, when I checked this, when I was looking at these tires, when I pulled this thing out maybe 6 weeks ago or something, and I was checking the tires and everything real careful, and I was looking at the bearings, I didn't notice that rotor being screwed up. And I bet you it wasn't. I bet you it was like slightly cracked, and it started cracking more as it used it. So this is something to watch for, and I'll be keeping an eye on the rear one, but I got a feeling the rear one's never going to crack because, like, again, you know, I put aftermarket pads on here, not the wrong kind, but they're not Harley Davidson, so they might be generating a little more heat. Again, and also this front brake had a lot more use. I had to change the caliber. I also, because I know I used the hell out of this brake, I put a braided, I don't know which one is, this is the one for, yeah, this the speedometer right here, and this is the brake. I changed it to a stainless steel because, you know, you got better braking power. So as far as man, but you know, another thing I should probably change, you know, I was thinking is that's why I'm probably holding off on doing a primary change. I might change this clutch cable out with a brand new one. That's another thing that can leave you stranded. You know, usually you got to make sure you oil up there on the top where the pivot is. That's usually where they break, right up here. Well, there doesn't seem to be any problem with it, but since it's freaking 30 years old, most of the parts in this bike have been changed. But the other thing about Harley is some aftermarket stuff is worse than Harley, but they got other aftermarket stuff that's a lot better. This thing, I'm going off here talking about a lot of shit just for the hell of it, but I didn't expect to say all this shit. But the shifter, whatever you call that, the shifter, not the shifter fork, you know what I mean? Forks are inside, but you know what I mean, the shifter. That actually cracked down here. And what I did was I don't know if it was an aftermarket one. It was a higher quality one. I installed it. It hasn't cracked since. But there's higher quality aluminum. than Harley. And Harley's not really screwed up, but they use good stuff, and it's got good quality, but they don't use, the aftermarket's got better stuff. The problem is, the bike's freaking expensive as it is. Even a Sportster ain't cheap, you know what I mean? But the thing is, you know, you're not going to find an aftermarket like Harley has on other bikes. I mean, I think the only other bike I like that I really respect a lot, that I think is like a jack of all trades, that's sort of around this side, is like a Honda CB 750 or 900 or something like that. That's a good one, but it's a wide bike too, you know. So anyway, beware of this crap, and if you're changing your brake pads, I throw in new rotors. I'm definitely never gonna, you know. This is like one thing I just want to put this out because, you know, this surprised the crap out of me. I do check this bike a lot, but you know, I don't really check that rotor like from this. I mean, I will look at it from here, and if one of the spokes is in a way, I will notice it. Like here, yeah, the crack is right here. You know, it's right there. So if I'm looking at it like this, I'm saying, oh, here's the wheel, looks good. You got to look at it from the other side. But I did look at it from the other side. It wasn't cracked like that. I'd say 6 weeks ago for sure. So, and it's in within specs. So obviously, got the axle out and waiting for the rotor to come in. It'll be in here in a few days. Freaking amazing, man. Freaking amazing. So glad I caught it, man. But you know, freaking unbelievable. And if you see that while you're, you know, say you're riding, you stop someplace and you notice that somebody goes, hey, your rotor's cracked. Well, obviously, you could ride the bike, just don't use that brake. You know, I mean, the bike's still going to stop pretty good just with a rear brake or just with a front brake. Just make sure you take it easy till you get home and fix it. So, you know, it's like that rotor's not going to, if there's no pressure on it, you're not using the brake, that rotor's not just going to fly apart, you know. I mean, I wouldn't ride around with it anyway because you might need both brakes or something. But, you know, if you guys got to get home, just don't use that brake. You should be fine. But, I mean, God, that is amazing, man. I'm going to tell you. I mean, I'm just blown away by this. I'm glad it freaking didn't break when I was riding it. Holy shit. God. But that's why, you know, every time I ride, I don't wear shorts. I wear a full leather jacket, or even the real thin one. Better than nothing. Full boots, gloves, the gauntlet gloves that go up there. I ride all that bullshit. The helmet, all that shit. So that's why I do it, because what are you gonna do? You know. Anyway, enough of that, because I could talk a lot of shit about bikes and riding at night and shit that's in the road at night that fell off a truck and all this other crap. I could tell you there's a lot of shit that goes on when you're riding.